Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the next episode of Mothership Audio Podcast. Today we are joined by Snezhina Duevska, a musician and a musical entrepreneur. And so, Snezhina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Alex and FA. And what a nice introduction, I must say. Yes, yes. My name is Snezhina Duevska, born and raised in Bulgaria, currently living in London. A lot of the people in here actually call me Snow because almost no one can pronounce the name. And yes, I'm a songwriter, performer, currently working a lot more on the business strategy side of things in the music industry. But everything that I do on a daily basis is a combination of my skills and experience as a creative and also as somebody with a lot of business experience so far in music.
That's amazing. And we're going to talk about the core of what you do in the music industry and how you promote things. But let's start off at the very beginning and tell us a bit about your earliest experiences in music and basically what artists and albums inspired you. And when was that moment when you decided, I'm going to pick up a guitar and become this badass rock chick that I always want to be?
Fair. Well, I started playing the guitar and like playing music as a whole fairly late. I was like 15. I had done like singing as a kid, but in Eastern Europe, singing is like it's a very much like in a pop sense, and you end up going to all these like festivals or competitions for young singers, which I didn't like that much. So I had a very long pause, and then when I was around 15, I my parents gave me a guitar for Christmas, and I started learning. I did a few lessons, which I found super boring because they taught me how to play the guitar from an old Russian textbook, like from the 70s. So I was like, I don't want to do this. And I started watching YouTube videos. So that's how I learned to play the guitar. Just YouTube videos. And then at 16, I started a band back home in Bulgaria. And I think the stars were aligned in our favor. And also, we had some incredible people who helped us to establish the band pretty seriously. And this project continued for about 10 years, which led us to releasing an album, touring throughout Europe, um, hosting an international music festival for 3 years, opening a rock cafe, moving to London, and a bunch of other things that involved that. But essentially, it all started with playing the guitar and listening to bands like The Doors, Nirvana, Tina Turner, very much, I'd say, rooted in rock music. Even though, of course, I love certain pop too. I mean, I love ABBA, but yes, it was rock essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I
Very
kind
old
of get.
school. Just mentioning these names, I'm like, ooh, I didn't mention anyone new, like, but that's how it started.
Look, it's okay. Don't betray our age, okay? But that's okay. I mean, because we've known each other for quite a long time, and we also jammed together and played music together, and that was also a really cool experience when we got to London. And I think both of us kind of had that sense, like, okay, we're going to London to this basically what is essentially musical mecca for us. And that's what I also wanted to ask you because it's always very different. Each experience is quite unique for artists trying to push their way through a certain place, especially like London, where it's very cutthroat, where there's so many artists. Will you tell us a bit more about your experiences being a performing artist there and how you eventually transitioned to management and music business as such?
I think London is incredible. And one of the reasons why I came to London was because of the music. I could have gone to study in other places. Obviously, you and me, Alex, we met at uni, but I chose London because of the music scene. And I think everyone comes to London to become a rock star, and then you realize that every other person you meet is in London to become a rock star of some sort. It could be within their own field, but yeah, everyone comes here to try to make it big. But I also think if you make it in London, you essentially make it everywhere, really. So I think the competition is really tough in here because you have so many talented people Um, but it's an incredible place to really, I think, improve your craft simply because you realize how many talented people there are, and you realize that you need to work really hard, which is, I think, a good thing. What surprised me a lot from playing in Eastern Europe and then coming to London was that in here people pretty much didn't get paid, which was strange because for me, gigging in, across Bulgaria, Greece, gigging in Germany, like for all the gigs we've done, we always got paid. And when we started doing gigs in London, it's almost like you gotta pay to play. Um, and by that, I want to say like you don't necessarily pay people to put you on stage, but the entire organization to get yourself to that point, essentially you're paying along the way. So for me, that was a bit of a strange transition. And especially if you end up following the rules of like working with promoters here in London, if you're an up and coming artist, so if you're in the beginning of the game, it's a scheme. If you ask me, I would say avoid promoters as a whole, because you never get paid. Um, and I'd say when I was making music in Bulgaria at that point, that's like around, let's say, 2010, 2012. Um, there was not really like an established music industry, especially if you're more on the rock side of things or the alternative one. So we created the business around our band and around our music. Um, and I started applying those principles in London. And this was the moment when I started to see a little bit of money. Other than that, if you follow sort of the established rules, I'm making air quotes right now, it's not, um, it's very hard. Um, so, yeah, after playing for many years in London, I wanted to learn more about the rules of the game, of playing the music industry game. And that's how I ended up more in business, which I've been doing now for the past 4 years. I've been working with recording artists in here and also within music tech startups who are trying to challenge the well established music industry. So it required me to learn a lot about it in order to find ways how we can challenge it. Um, and yeah, what a long answer uh, to this question. But I
It
can go
was.
on and on and on.
It's
As you
actually
should,
pretty
as you should.
pretty interesting to hear that in like the division of music industry in London seems very corporate and very professional, but the things that you are actually saying is very unprofessional. It's very interesting and it's very surprising in many ways.
No, definitely, it is super corporate, and I think it is because, of course, if you get picked up in London, very soon you'll end up touring in the States. So I think a lot of artists have to play by the rules. What made me realize that it's all, can I swear on this podcast?
Absolutely, you
Of
can.
course, come
So
on.
bullshit is when I figured out that at the moment labels are teaching artists to do the things that I did 10 years ago in Bulgaria. And I realized, you know what, it's actually pointless trying to learn the rules of this game because they're trying to go back to something I did before very successfully, which was you create your own rules and you create your own fan base and you create your own ways to, let's use the popular lingo now, to monetize it, which is essentially find ways to um, make earnings or get some value back. I think that value doesn't always have to be money from your fans. It could be a lot of other things. So when I realized that at the moment the music business and the music industry is going towards that, of finding your niche, finding like a small group of fans who will love you and will always be there for you and for your art, I realized, well, I've done it before. Let me try to see how I can really collect all of my experiences and be able to explain it to somebody else or to apply it to other artists. So essentially, what I do now is I work independently with artists, and I just help them more with the business strategy behind their music and their art.
Amazing.
Wonderful.
And honestly, it's actually quite interesting because I already kind of saw the seeds of this growing when we back in the day when we were like still more or less kids, for lack of a better term. We were barely adults. When I still remember the gigs you held at behind the Norwegian church somewhere in, was it Shoreditch? No, it wasn't Shoreditch.
Yeah, it was Canada Water.
Oh,
Um,
right,
to
right.
give people context, at some point I ended up living in a Norwegian church, which was a great place because we had like our own PA, and I started hosting gigs in my flat. I think our like when we started reaching like our most successful gigs was we had like 50, 60 people turning to the gigs, which is unheard of for London. For London, if you get 20 people to show up and see you live for, an upcoming or a new independent artist, that's like you're doing great. 50, 60 people was an incredible success, and especially because the people who showed up had like great culture around listening to the bands and wanting to find new music. Something that you come across in here is like people play their gig and then whoever came to see them leaves the show, so the band that is after that, they're playing to a smaller audience, and so on and so on. I think, yeah, I'm hoping now that this will change with like post pandemic times. I hope that people are hungry for live music. But before the pandemic, there was some sort of I think people, there's just so much happening in here that they can't be really bothered to explore.
Yeah, I mean that's also a huge problem. Generally, in music in general, like the general industry has changed drastically because now with the rise of the so-called bedroom producer and people just doing it all by themselves, music, at least the music industry, seems that it's been more or less saturated for a while. So it's not that it's hard to find new music, it's more that there's so much of it. It's hard to keep up. And usually we like to have that kind of collective feeling like, oh, you know this artist? Yeah, of course I know this artist. And you kind of make this kind of connection with people through music. With so many artists happening, it's very hard to find people who are just like, oh, I listen to this guy, and some person will have no idea. And I think that's also very possible now when you look at YouTube songs that have almost 500 million views or like a super famous artist and so on, people will have no idea who it is. And imagine that for even smaller artists that are independent, especially. So it's always difficult to kind of make that connection with the crowd.
No, absolutely. But then there's another thing. I think technology has democratized making music and creating it. So, of course, there's a lot more music out there, a lot more shit music as well. Um, but I also feel like because of technology, I think it is giving the opportunity for artists who are not so famous and they do more like weird stuff that wouldn't be necessarily liked by the masses to find their place and to actually um, be able to make an earning. Like I work with some artists that you've never heard of them. There's no way you can, they just have such small following, and yet they make more money per month than somebody who has 50K followers on Instagram, simply because we're using different platforms and different sort of technology to be able to access the people who might like this weird genre of music that they're making. So, yeah, I think there are negatives and positives of this sort of. I think music now feels a bit like the Wild West. Each person to their own and use whatever you can use to make it.
Right, since we're already on this topic, like I would ask you as a professional, would you tell young artists to rather focus on a general idea or focus rather on a niche that they're comfortable with, music wise?
I'll always say focus on a niche, but that for me to say this, I would need to have worked a couple of times with this artist just to know who they are. Like, because if you focus on a niche, that would mean you have to work really hard to really find what is that niche, and it would also mean that you need to arm yourself with a lot of patience because um, it might take some time to develop this niche group of people who would like you. But with that being said, I also think if you go for something general, like you just end up being average. So yeah, like always, like don't go for the general thing. I don't really know what you mean by general, Alex.
Like basically like well, I guess that was a little vague. I suppose in a way like following certain trends, always trying to be what is popular now. Like for example, let's say you're an artist and you just want to make pop music, you want to be a pop star. And especially hard when you have no promoters or somebody writing for you or somebody pushing you. But let's say you are a bedroom producer and you're like, okay, the popular genre right now is trap. So I'll make a trap song. Or let's say I want to get into synthwave because the weekend just kind of exploded with that right now.
I think personally, I'm very against that. So that's my personal opinion. Business wise, this is exactly what they'll teach you. Figure out what the consumer slash the fan wants and just feed them with that. But I think if every artist started acting this way, this would be the end of good music. So I am very much against it. I think if you really want to be an artist, because I think this word as well is thrown around quite a lot lately, but if you want to be an artist, you need to know what you want to do and why you're doing it, and then find a way to feed it to people or find the people who would appreciate it. If you want to make the music that everybody likes, that's fine, but don't call yourself an artist because essentially you're just a salesperson who happens to make music. And that's okay, but just don't sugarcoat it.
Interesting distinction, actually. And what you have mentioned in where if everybody starts doing the same, we won't have good music anymore. It already has started in many genres and many markets, as far as I can see. Don't you agree? What do you guys think?
Yeah, it has definitely started. And the thing is, like, I feel if somebody decides to go down this path, you have to make sure that it doesn't come out at some point because uh, I've seen some artists, like I know some artists who do this exact same thing. They know what's trendy now and they make the music that they know people would like, and the music is okay. But personally, because I've worked with them behind the scenes, when I found out that this is what they were doing, like I lost all respect for them artistically. I can still say an incredible producer who makes great music, but it's like you're taking away what makes art art. So yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that you make shit music, but it's just artists have a greater mission, and if you don't want to do it, that's totally fine. Um, yeah, but yeah, I think that's my opinion. If I talk even more and more, I'll just say the same
Yeah, I
thing.
mean, I completely agree with you. And I think there has
Yeah.
to be an important distinction between what is an artist and what is an entertainer. It's very different things. And I completely agree with you. And I think that well, we can go into the philosophy of art and what it means to be an artist and being true to oneself and discovering what is truth and how you follow and how you perceive your truth. And basically, I believe that once you find your sound, once you try to find that, basically what you want to get out of yourself, like as an artist, like you want to have that creative edge, you want to get that personality of yours out, it has to be original. And by following trends, of course, the best artists steal, as we know, but it doesn't mean that that idea of a sound, like a genre, which I am generally very much against using genres, that should not define who you are as an artist or how to define your sound, but more as a certain. It's like training wheels. You don't learn how to ride a bike immediately. You need the training wheel just to get off the ground and get moving. That's how I see it.
Yeah. What about you, Efe? What do you think?
Oof, there are many different aspects on this one. I agree on the most of what you have explained, but at the same time, people want entertainers. That's one of the issues, and I suppose as um, let's say the people of the world, we are failing to teach people what is an art piece, so to say, and what is not, and what is an entertainment, um,
Product, basically.
let's say,
Yeah. No,
product. Yeah,
with that,
precisely.
I agree with that. I think because Alex, you use the word entertainer, so probably we should try to distinguish things a little bit. But I don't think that doing your market research in business stuff and figuring out, okay, people like trap, or people like, I don't know, Justin Bieber, I should make more music like Justin Bieber. I don't think that's necessarily entertainment in the sense we're using this. It just means like, instead of creating the music you want to create or pushing the boundaries of something, you see what people like to eat or listen to and you make the same thing, which is just replicating, which that's fine. I mean, if you end up putting on a great show, then well done for that. Like, I totally feel that if you want to make music, if you want to make money out of music and you want to go touring, you definitely have to be an entertainment. I mean, it's an entertainer. It's called show business for a reason. And if I come and if I go to see somebody live, I expect, you know, a show. So on this one, I totally hear you, FA. Yes. Um, Artists who want to be touring and who want to be playing music live, yes, definitely think about the show for sure. But that doesn't necessarily mean writing the same music as somebody else just because, people will like it.
Precisely, but what I'm trying to mean is that the artist, so to say, quoting the artist part here, usually, as far as I'm concerned, the aim and the object, the mission of actually doing music um, is having the spirit of becoming an entertainer. That's the problem, and I think the deep down what lays on beneath this is the culture itself, the culture that we are imposing to ourselves, or the culture that we are being imposed on, so to say. As far as I can see, especially this was much clearer when I visited Belgrade, where all of us as a society in this region, let's say Europe and Near East, we are all subjected to the same understanding of a culture. So the expectation becomes the same. The supply of people who are conducting this art piece or entertainment piece, whatever that is, are becoming the same at the same time. So I suppose that what shapes the demand for art or entertainment is the culture that has been imposed on us for a long, long time. It was in the 80s and 90s, like maybe we are thinking that it was quality culture piece, but it was the same method, it was the same pop culture that has been imposed on us. And right now, we are just talking that, oh, yeah, the current pop culture, yeah, it sounds like shit.
Yeah,
But
but
it was
that's
what has
marketing.
been said
They're marketing nostalgia.
precisely.
They're exactly trying to make nostalgia a business. Like the 80s had its fair share of pretty shitty music, let's be fair, but now they just kind of been fishing out this specific sound. While it is based on 80s music, it definitely is not 80s music. And again, nostalgia is a marketing tool. It really is.
Yeah.
Agreed. Agreed.
No, fair. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think, yeah, it's a very, I agree with everything you say, Efe. And again, I think if you're a producer, probably will have to write certain, if you're just a producer who just write music for others, you might end up, if you get commissioned to write a track that sounds like, I don't know, Travis Scott or whatever, you'll probably have to do it. If that's especially like, if you only make your money from music, you probably have to make certain compromises. So I think we need to make a distinguish. We have to make a difference between, I guess, yeah, somebody who just wants to be an artist and push the boundaries and maybe never make it in their lifetime, but 50 years later, people say, like, wow, this person really challenged everything. And someone who wants to have a career in music and make a living out of music as well.
Precisely. Many elements of this issue, let's call it an issue, is going to be an endless circle, a relationship between an egg and a chicken, so to say. So it's going to be hard to decide where this all starts, but that's what it is at the moment. Maybe in the future it'll change because we have social media, as you mentioned, we have internet, and we have access to millions and millions of creators out in the world. So differentiation from others and how to say the individuality mindset itself will probably sort this out in the near future because everybody wants to be different and everybody want to listen to something that is not being listened to. So who knows? I'm not very, let's say, pessimistic about the future outcome of the current culture and the product supply that we have at the moment. It's going to shape itself up.
Yeah.
Anyway, speaking of beginnings, let's kind of get back on track with the questions because I think we're coming now to a very interesting part of the script, so to say. And I want to ask you, like, what were your first experiences, and when was that moment where you felt like working with artists was your calling?
I think there wasn't an aha moment. This is exactly what I should do. I think I spent a long time being an artist myself and writing music and performing it and putting on shows. At some point, I felt like I needed a bit of a break from that because it had been going for about 10 years. Um, and I just fell into it very naturally with working with other artists. And I think there's been a lot of conversation to make the industry more diverse, which is very much needed, and to make it a lot better when it comes to mental health and wellness for artists and creatives. Um, and I think I realized that we need more people working on the business side of things who know what it is to be on stage, what it is to create music, and what are the challenges mentally, physically, and emotionally for artists and creatives. So I feel like by supporting artists business wise and project management wise, I am doing my own little bit of improving the industry for the better. Yes. Plus, the industry needs a lot more women, and it needs a lot more people of color, and it needs a lot more LGBT plus people. So I think it's good that, yeah. I think, yeah, it didn't really answer what was the aha moment. I fell into it very naturally, and um, it was just how it ended up developing, essentially.
I think we can say that that's the case for most of us, really. It just kind of happened, you know.
Yeah.
So you also had your own music incubator, like music tech startup as well that you were working on. Could you tell us a bit more about that as well?
Yeah, well, there's one thing that I was doing more a social enterprise thing in Bulgaria. It's a youth organization called Art Chance. So we're helping young people who create projects within the arts. So it's not just music. We just help them with tools, with platforms, and with connections. With this project, we ended up hosting like an international music festival in my hometown for a couple of years. But also here in London, I spent 2 years working at the very first music incubator called the Rattle, where we took music tech startups and music artists. We brought them together in this place, and we helped them develop their projects further. So the support we were giving the artists is more like how can they think of their music and themselves as a business. So we would give them those tools and those practices that are very much used by startups. But on the other side, the startups who are joining us, who are building different tools, services, or platforms for music, um, what they were gaining from us was having access to other creatives who could test out their products, who could give them feedback, and who could help them more with the creative side of things. Um, so yeah, like the concept of an incubator or an accelerator, it's not anything new, especially when it comes to the business world and the startup world, but no one has really used it with artists. So the Rattle is pretty much one of the first places doing this, and um, yeah, it's really exciting to see what's going to come out of the Rattle as a whole, because at the moment they're playing around as well with, how can we reimagine labels, and is there a way to create better versions of those, and we'll see how things go. But that's my experience with it. Essentially, it's helping artists be more entrepreneurial and finding different ways to test out what they are creating, whether that is with music or with merchandise that they might create, to figuring out different ways how they can engage their fans and audience better.
All right, that's actually really interesting, and basically, it is something like a well, a more unique approach, as you said, not necessarily in the business world and in the management world, but it is definitely in the artistic world. And since you've already been working with a lot of artists, and you've been working with young artists, as you said in Bulgaria, uh, and since you are in the field and you've had experience, what would you what would you advise a young artist who is trying to start out by himself to promote his material and networking? How should he approach it? And what would you say is the healthy mindset to go into this very chaotic world?
I think the healthy mindset for anyone starting, he, she, or they, would be to focus on making as much music as you can. Um, don't I see a lot of artists holding on to the first songs they've created. Um, I don't know why they do it. I assume it's because once it's on streaming platforms, I think they're hoping that a lot of their friends will go out there and check it out and they'll get a lot of streams. But I don't think that's the right approach. I'd say share your music as much as you can, even before you've uploaded it on the streaming platforms. Because if you've written a good song, people will come back to it. Um, so that's one of the first things. And probably the first songs you write, they'll be shit from 2 or 3 years after you're in it. You realize, oh my gosh, I make so much better music now. It's just part of the process. Um, and essentially, once you'll always be working on the music side of things, but definitely think about your brand in terms of know why you're doing what you're doing. A lot of people start making music just because they love it and they like it, but you need to connect it to something greater and something bigger. Think about what are your values in terms of what are you standing up for, and see whether you're communicating that through your actions, through your music, through the way you communicate with people. Again, your brand is something that will evolve as you evolve as an artist, but having a basic starting point is very important, I think. And the other thing I would like to pay attention to, because now a lot of artists feel overwhelmed with social media, and a lot of them are very worried that they're actually spending a lot more time on creating content for Instagram than actually making music. I would say try to distinguish between those two mindsets, and one is the creative mindset where you make your music or you make your art and you think about your brand and why you're doing what you're doing, and the other mindset is the content creator mindset. They have two different outcomes, and the way you um, create within those two mindsets are very different. For one of them, you're creating for the sake of creating, and you're creating because it's aligned with who you want to be as an artist and as a person. The other one is more of communicating what your art is about, the content side of it. So you need to then really use tools that you know people like. So I think being able to switch between those two mindsets is very important. Um, yeah. I'll say with that, just make as much music as you can, get better at it, and pay attention on who you are, why you're doing what you're doing, what do you stand for, um, because people would want to be able to align with you and with your values, and that's part of being authentic. And you need to be able to communicate what's unique about you.
Wonderful. Yeah, yeah, and like in short terms, I suppose this relates to being passionate about what you do in all essence.
No, absolutely, yes. And you could be passionate really about anything. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be passionate about something that nobody before you has been
Hmm.
passionate about. I guess again we come into, being unique or whatever, but really following your passion, even if it's something that it's not unique. I think your passion and you're interested in it would make it authentic.
I think that's also what's
Exactly.
lacking in the music industry now. This kind of authenticity. Although what
No, I
does
think though at the same time, there are incredible artists at the moment who are making amazing music and who are weird in their own
Yeah,
beautiful ways.
absolutely.
It's very difficult to find them because the algorithms just keep on feeding you what you like. So it's very
Exactly. Yeah.
much different to just find out somebody who's so different from what you usually listen to, but you might actually like that song. So, yeah, I think there are a lot of interesting artists out there. It's just very hard to find them. And I only say this because I work with artists on a daily basis and I listen to so many of them um, just for my job. So I know that there's a lot of good people out there, but it's just impossible to find them unless you spend like 3, 4 hours, which no one will do if you're just an audience or a listener. You won't spend 3, 4 hours searching for new artists. You just go for whatever you like. That's easy to access.
Yeah, I think that's also the problem with general how, as you said, the media works that way, and especially since most, especially with Spotify, for example, you're just asking to be put on a playlist of similar tunes and so on. You get lost eventually into the giant mess that it creates, and that's why I'm very cautious when I like to talk about genres because again, the whole reason why genres exist is to label music for marketing purposes. Let's be honest. Especially now in modern days. Before it was different. It was movements. It was politically motivated, and so on and so on. But now that's no longer the case. So it's quite interesting in how basically how the whole music industry has evolved into this weird. How could I call this, like this whole storm of genres and labels and songs and so on, and it just happened to occur in the streaming age, because 10 years ago nobody was talking about streaming, and you had the mainstream and you had the underground, and now everything has become such a weird mishmash of everything. So even though it is confusing, you can always find your way. Just
Yeah,
as they would say, stick to your guns to a certain extent, but
true. But now
also
Also,
be
because of
open.
streaming, you could have an artist in Serbia who might have a fan base in London or might have a fan base in Argentina. Like 10
exactly. Yeah.
years ago, that would have been pretty much impossible. Whether now we have tools where you could really find out who, where are the people who love what you do. I think the only sort of problem for artists now is that there's a lot of expectations on them. You not only have to be incredible, music maker, let's call it that, but you also have to be very good at business and very good with social media and all of that. So to go back to your previous question, Alex, one more thing I'm gonna add is for artists, don't be afraid to start building a team from the get go, and build trust with people and know that you can't just do it on your own. When ideas are built together, they're so much better than if you're just on your own in your bedroom bouncing out tracks on Logic or whatever you use. Um, so yeah, like start thinking about your team from the beginning. If you have a friend who's very good at photography, get closer with them. See if they want to take photos of you. If you have a friend who loves listening to music and expressing their opinion about music, well, ask them to write a review about your song or ask them how they would explain your music to somebody else. Yeah, if you have a friend who's got a big car, well, keep them close because you might go touring. I think it's just tapping into the small resources that you have in the beginning and then start expanding more and more and more.
Wonderful. So you say, don't be shy towards your friends first and foremost.
Yeah, of course, don't take the piss, but very
Yeah.
often people want to help because I think people want to be close to creatives because creatives make you feel special and they make you feel like there's something more to this world than just living and making money and doing things. Like you feel like you're part of something bigger. Um, so yeah, definitely like get people involved in your mission. And if you're very passionate about something and you're super authentic, people will just gradually come towards you and they will want to help you achieve whatever you need to achieve and go further in your journey.
Amazing.
Wonderful mindset.
Absolutely. And since you're already on this question about these whole age gaps and how it was different back in the day when we were when we were young. Okay, maybe not that, but
We're still very young at
we are
work.
still very young.
So
I know, I know.
you've had all this wisdom within you, you know. So even in your early 20s, you were like,
Don't start with this. The gray hair is already showing. So, but going back to my original question, since we've been active for, well, musically we've been active for more or less 10 years now, which is
yeah.
quite interesting if you think about it. And how would you say, generally, from the managerial part and also from the artistic part, how much has it differed for you as an artist and how you perceive generally back in the 2010s compared to now, the 2020s?
Well, the big difference is, I think, streaming. Nothing else has really changed apart from the fact that now you have to be a lot more savvy. Before, we just played music, we turned up in venues, we played, people bought the merch, people bought tickets, and that was it. But now you have this completely different world that you need to learn how to navigate, and you have to learn how to navigate it, working with distributors, with publishers, getting royalties, like that's very important. 10 years ago I never even bothered about royalties. I was like, I've written incredible songs, but in Bulgaria nobody really pays you royalties, so I'm like, all I want is to play live, sell tickets, and sell merch. Whether now it works very different, like you can get royalties, especially if you, especially in places like the UK, but I think now even Eastern Europe has become very good with monetizing things and paying out royalties and all of that. So any artist has to know that, and I think there's a lot more knowledge that's shared online. So I think the changes are good. It's a bit more difficult to navigate it, but it's not impossible. I feel like we were still a little bit naive, and maybe that is because, let's not forget, like our countries were pretty much under dictatorship for a very long time. So early 2000s, the way people in Eastern Europe felt about music is probably how people in the UK felt about music in the 60s. So we had a very short period of time to catch up with everything that's happening in music and to learn everything new. Um, but yeah, the difference is now knowing how to navigate the digital side of everything, which I think we're a lot more literate than back in the day.
Oh,
Um,
for sure, for sure.
yes, so that's what has changed. But I think artists are very savvy with managing their social medias, making music, and all of that. I just say try to play live as much as you can. I think this is what a lot of artists are lacking now. Everyone is creating music in their bedrooms. Some of the songs are good, but they could become so much better if you actually get that feedback from a crowd, or it could be just your friends. Play your songs live and see what works and what doesn't work.
Exactly, and I think it's also important to note to a lot of musicians that playing live does not mean that you're going to play in front of a crowd of 10,000 people. Playing live also means very intimate places, very small places, and it's a completely different mindset. And once you manage to kind of to balance both of them, it becomes kind of like second nature. But these smaller, more intimate settings, which you can do basically next week, and just call a bunch of your friends, tell them you're holding a small concert, like a small 20-minute concert, and that gives you not only confidence but also gives you like a more direct feedback of your songs, like how they're being approached. And I think, as you said, a lot of artists are lacking that, and I think a lot of artists don't understand how important that is for them as musicians to kind of feel that with
The
the
crowd.
crowd.
Yeah. And if the music that you make as an artist is difficult to, let's say, perform live because maybe it's more on the electronic side of things and you need particular tech with you, try to find out different ways for you to perform it live, because I think this would also help you become a better musician, but also it will give you a lot more confidence to work on different projects. Like you might be able to apply for a grant or for some sort of project to do something live or to do a sound installation, and knowing what your abilities are is very good. Um, yeah. And one more thing I want to add, actually, that's has changed a lot from my mindset of 10 years ago to now, is I am a lot more open and advocating for collaboration. I think when you start out, especially young artists tend to hold on to their music and be a bit like egocentric about things, but actually collaborating with others can be incredible. And you can end up making a lot better music or creating much more impactful projects. The only thing is, as well, don't be shy to discuss the practical side of things. Like if you're writing a song with somebody else, don't be afraid before you even started making music to sort of discuss, like, hey, how are we going to split that? Or, discuss, yeah, literally discuss how you could split royalties and stuff like that. Don't shy away from it, because sometimes this could prevent you from collaborating with people and you might miss out on something awesome.
Amazing advice again, and yeah, I think people should really take notes on this one, to be honest. And it's also they shouldn't be afraid to go into the darker side, the more unpleasant side, not darker side. Like as you said, like talk about royalties, talk about your fair share. Don't be afraid to ask for it.
Yeah,
because you deserve it at the end of the day.
absolutely. And if you think that there's some sort of a special formula in how shares are split, there isn't. Literally, it's just whatever you negotiate for yourself. So yeah, the more open you are about it, the better.
So this means also improve your skills on negotiating, guys. Improve your skills on
Absolutely.
bartering.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. It's show business. It's all about charisma and how much you want to stand up for you and your art.
Yeah,
It
It
and
is
I
is
what
what
it
it
is.
is.
yeah, and having those sort of tough and uncomfortable / awkward conversations from the beginning will also help you get to know a lot better the person you'll be working with, and they might actually show that they're not really worthy of your time or of your talents because they're not handling it very well. So that's great, you've saved yourself time and probably some issues and challenges.
Absolutely. But now let's go a little bit more lighthearted. And we want to ask you, like, did you have any kind of crazy experiences while doing your job? Did something weird happen? And of course, yeah, go on.
Probably there is. I'm just wondering if what could happen. I mean, anything weird. I'd say the only thing that's coming across now, and it's not even that much around doing my job, but mainly like playing live. Once with my band, we had to play a gig in front of like 3, 4 thousand people, and like 3 weeks before the gig, we ended up not having a drummer, and that was like a really crazy experience to have to find somebody, decide what what our set list is going to be, try to learn the songs and teach this person to play the songs. That was a very insane experience, which it was quite crazy. But this festival was like such a big opportunity that we couldn't have missed out on. And drummers tend to be very weird. I don't know if what Efe plays, but is he a drummer?
No, no, he's a lead
No, no.
guitarist, rock and roll star, aren't you, Efe?
But I think, yeah, sometimes I think drummers can be very emotional and touchy feely about things. I don't know if it's because they're at the back of the band and yet they're so important. But sometimes, like, I think, they feel like as if they don't matter. So look after your drummers and also keep in mind that they could be weird from time to times.
Interesting. I actually had an experience in another artist in a band who are the bassists that are actually having these emotions rather than the drummers. But I suppose yeah,
Careful with your words, Efe. I'm just gonna say, be very careful for the next couple of
yeah.
sentences.
Look, Alex. I never considered you as a bassist because, like, you play a lot of different things, and I think you have a broader mind than an average bassist itself. So, please don't take this personally. But in general, um, I usually have come across bassists that becoming very, very emotional about not being the star of the band, or the attention within that musical group.
Okay, guys, can you stop alienating our crowd, please? I think the audience is already gone at this point, at least half of them.
No, no, but no, I'm only bringing it up. And by the way, like again, I'm saying I think everyone is so important within a band. And for people who are in bands, because there's something that I'm noticing lately is like there are very few bands out there, especially in London.
Yeah.
Everyone is going for a solo career. And I think it is because it's difficult to manage a group of people. Um, it's difficult to manage everyone's expectations. So I think being very open with your bandmates is so important. And whenever somebody's feeling like they're not being appreciated enough, it's very important to create that atmosphere when people can share that. So you can avoid, bad situations, and it's important for everyone to be on the same page. So yeah, I could say, I mean, I would love to say, oh, drummers are crazy, but no, Effie, you're giving a great example. Like, I can give examples with a lot of like lead singers as well being like crazy.
Of course.
Yeah, but I think you need to be a true master of communication in order to be able to keep a band together. It's very important. And with that being said, yeah, I'm sorry, Alex. I don't think I gave you a very exciting story of something weird happening. I wish I
No,
could. Oh,
we went into this.
someone
It's
shot
fine.
themselves right before they went on stage. We needed to find them a clean pair of jeans. I don't have a story like
I mean, no, that's okay. I mean, we just went into insulting drummers and bassists, which is basically what every band does at some point. So it's fine.
Well, it is actually insults if those people are what we are saying. But
I mean, it's a good thing they don't know how to operate computers, so they won't listen to this podcast anyway.
pretty much so. And just a follow-up question about this topic itself. What do you think? Should the administrative motives of a band be a democracy, or should it be a dictatorship? Like, I'm not saying a dictatorship in a really bad sense, but as in like all power to one member of the group or two members of the group that have all the administrative, let's say, initiatives. What do you think? Or what are your experiences?
if it's a dictatorship, let's go this way, or if there's one person who's running everything, I think essentially it's a solo project with session musicians, really. If you're running a band, I think essentially there will be someone who come across as the leader of the band. I think it's important to have a leader of the band, and that doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be the lead singer or whatever. There's just somebody within a group of people. There's always someone who has those leadership qualities. But when it comes to administrative tasks and everything else that comes into running a band, I think everyone needs to be equally involved. And I think other band members needs to come to the forefront and say, hey, I'm good at this and this and this, or I love doing this and that, so I'll take over that. But another person is good in something else. To give an example, for example, you might have let's say a bassist who's very good at social media, so you could be okay, you're going to look after the social media. But for example, you might have a drummer who's crazy about organizing and spreadsheets, so you can give the drummer the task to arrange transportation and let's say where you're going to be staying and stuff like that. And then the lead singer or whatever, if it's an instrumental band, might be great at graphic design. So their job could be to create all the content and the assets that the bassist will be putting on Instagram or whatever. I think everyone needs to be involved. Yes, you might end up having a leader, which I don't think it's a problem. Um, but everyone needs to be doing more than just showing up for rehearsals and for gigs and playing their instrument. That is if you are taking the band seriously and you want to go far.
Of course, of course. The dedication
Yeah, yeah.
always have to be there.
Yeah, what is your opinion though, Efe? Do you think it needs to be complete democracy or it needs to be slightly dictatorshipy?
I would say the second, but I very much agree with you. Because as far as I can say, you are the most experienced person in this podcast group uh, when it comes to managing a musical band or even managing something when you are creating as a solo artist. Like you have to manage the people that you work with. So I ran across a lot of issues with being a dictatorshipy kind of leader in a band and also having like full on democracy because the first one, it's okay, you make decisions pretty fast, yes, and you don't really have to second think about what ifs. But at the same time, if you have some personal desire, you tend to become more and more shy about expressing it. But when there is a full on democracy in managing a band itself, I think the getting results is very slow. Like everybody has, of course, different aspirations, different wants, and finding the middle point. It's a concept of art itself. It is very hard, and you really need to have very good people skills, but also not only you, everybody else in the band really has to have really good bureaucratic and people skills, if you know what I mean. So I would say a hybrid version of both, I suppose. Like how you said it,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that's the way forward. And it's very important to be clear with where you're hoping the band to go. I think it's very important people to share what they want because you might be just a couple of friends who love playing together and you're hoping that, you might end up playing some big festivals and see where it goes, but then you might have somebody else in the band who's like, this is a serious project and we're hoping to get signed by a label. If you don't communicate that this is what you want from the project, you might be disappointed when somebody's like, well, I'm over this, now I want to do something else, so I'm quitting the band.
Mhm.
And you might be like, but I thought we were hoping to get signed. Well, if you've never expressed how you feel about it and see what others feel about your expectations, I think this is when you end up being disappointed.
Precisely.
Yeah, it's all about
Openness.
communication, really.
Yeah. And
Yes.
I think as well, a lot of managers, like being a manager of a band is so different from being the manager of a solo artist. And it's a very difficult field to communicate. There's this incredible documentary. Now I think it's old. It's, I think it's some kind of a monster. It's a Metallica documentary
Yeah,
where,
it is some kind of monster. Yeah.
yeah, like the whole movie is about them going to therapy and discussing whatever problems they have. That's very important to build this level of trust and communication from the beginning. Um,
Well, all I remember from that movie is Dave Mustaine crying. So I'm sorry.
I know you're a Megadeth fan, Efe, but come on now.
No, I mean that was a distraction. I'm sorry, but after seeing that, I forget about everything that is related to that movie. But yes, I agree. It was a wonderful documentary. Also, a lot of documentaries out there that are behind the music or um, I don't really remember names. I'm sorry about that, but there are a lot of great documentaries which have one thing in common, as you mentioned, the communication between members of a band or even in a solo project. Like I would say Megadeth itself is a solo project of Dave Mustaine, but it's there are members, there are musicians in there, and the communication of them is also pretty much important for that to strive and move on and create that wonderful, wonderful music that we enjoy today. So, yeah, I completely 100% agree with that vision, as you mentioned.
All right, so let's move on and let me ask you because you worked with so many artists and with so many great musicians in the UK area, not just in the UK area, but throughout all of Europe. Uh, which artist would you say that we should kind of, you know, give a listen to, like keep our ears open for, like your personal favorites?
my personal favorites. Let's see. I'm gonna give you some artists that are really like obscure, I guess, but they are worth
Yeah,
following.
like just artists that you think that really need some more exposure. That you really think like the art it's pure, it's honest, it's great. They're doing great work, and they deserve a lot more views.
Um, all right. So first, where do I start? So there's one artist who's based in Tokyo, Australian person, but based in Tokyo. Her name is Rhyme. Um, and she has two projects. One is Rhyme So, where she works with a very famous Tokyo producer, and the other one is just Rhyme. I think she deserves a listen because um, there's always a greater meaning behind the songs, and the music is also pretty good and sometimes very obscure. So I can send you links, I guess, because it might be hard to find them like that. I
Yeah.
think Rhyme deserves a listen. There's an artist that I'm working with who I think is very bold in her music. Her name is Ebony Buckle, and she's incredible with like uh, creating that niche audience for herself. Like at the moment, she's releasing her album song by song every month, which hasn't been done that many times. And she's producing very high quality videos for each of her songs. Like she literally has a song of a whale who's a space traveler that's floating in space, and that's the video as well. And I just think it's just so out there, and she's able to do this because she's found a way to make it completely on her own independently, and is not following any of the industry standards of what she should be doing as a female artist and by everyone. Uh, so I like what she's doing. There's an artist called Mimi Barks, um, who's interesting because she is combining metal with trap. And I think it's really interesting, but she's getting a lot of dissing from metal heads who think that it's shit. But actually, I don't think it's shit. And I think she's found a new way to bring two audiences together. I think she's in the process of releasing her first album. So I'm curious to see what music she's going to make, because now she's in that stage where she needs to make a lot of new music and she's working with different producers. So I think that's interesting to observe. She literally does screamo on top of trap beats.
Amazing though. That's lovely. Like as a metalhead myself, I will tell you this. Probably you are agreeing with me as well. The metalhead community is the most okay. I'm gonna be polite on this one. The most conservative audiences out there in the world when you compare it to all other genres. They are
Yeah, I
just
must say that I used
so
to be very
conservative.
conservative as well. I was like, oh, if it's not around rock, like it's not really good enough or whatever. But there's some very good music in there. And I think artists who are trying to do things differently deserve to, to give them a chance. At the end of the day, if you don't like it, you don't
Precisely.
like it. Absolutely. But yeah, I think she's doing interesting stuff. Um, and who else? There's a guy called Aonian, uh, who is doing electronic music, but it's fused with Greek, Turkish, sort of Eastern European folklore. And I think he's done it really interesting. And he's that type of artist who thinks about conceptual albums. And even though it's electronic music, which I've always said, like, ooh, it's not really what I listen to, the amount of thought and craft he's put in his music is very good. So I think he deserves sort of a shout out. Um, what else? Who else? Uh, yeah, I think these are pretty much all. I can think of a couple of other names, but these are interesting artists that deserve to.
I mean, there's also this pretty cool band called No Frames. I heard they're not too bad.
Yeah, they're retired now, but they're pretty good. So yeah, you can also listen to some of my music online with what we've done, what I've done back in the day. Um, but yeah, like that's the self-promotional bit, I guess, Alex.
Well, that's all fine. And you can all find the links to all these artists and to Snezhina as well down in the link below. And we are slowly coming to the end of our podcast. And we would like to ask you, you have any last comments? And before we say goodbye, we'd also like that you plug yourself, that you tell us what you're doing, where your life is going, what projects you've got working on, and what the future holds for you.
Yes. Well, I'd say the best way to for all of us to stay in touch is on Instagram. So you'll probably have in the link below my handle or whatever. And currently, I'm just like focused on working with artists and working on like different cultural projects. So with some artists, I help them on the creative side of things, where we're thinking of. Well, at the moment, I'm working with somebody with whom I'm helping them together with writing the music, but also figuring out how we're going to market it and taking over the project management, the business side of things, strategy, and all of that. And with others, I help them more align their own personal desires of like what they want to achieve in their life with their music and where the business plays, what role the business plays in that. So that's the direction I'm going, staying very much within music and culture as a whole, and pretty much freelancing in that space. But I'm also making music myself at the moment. I'm actually writing for I'm writing the music for an album of children's songs, which is a whole new universe for me. But I got in touch with a speech therapist in Bulgaria who's written these amazing um, little poems for children to improve their speech and to learn about the world and everything. And it's my task to write the music. So I'm doing a lot of research, and I really want to create something that's very different from like Baby Shark. Uh, so yeah, we'll see where that goes. So I'm keeping steady with making music and helping artists with the business side of things.
Amazing, amazing. So, guys, you know where to find her. And please support all the work that she comes out. The artists that she's supporting are also fantastic. As I said, everything's in the link below. And I also want to thank Snezhina. Thank you so much for coming. It's been a blast talking to you about everything from music industry to what's going on, what artists, space whales, amazing stuff.
No, thank you so much, guys, for having me. And to anyone who's listening, please don't hesitate to get in touch. I told this to Alex as well before. It will be great to create more connections between Eastern Europe, if most of these listeners are in Eastern Europe and London. Like there are a lot of uh, producers and artists and studios that I can put you in touch with, and vice versa. I think now we have all the right tools and the opportunities to really collaborate, even if we're not in the same city or country, which I think is very important. So yeah, let's network or let's connect and start building trust between each other.
So there you go, guys and
Right
gals.
on.
If you want to work with somebody who is professional, who is super cool, as you've heard for the last hour, and really knows her shit, Snezhina is there for you.
Thank you.
Efe, any last words?
Any last words? Well, I have to admit I'm mesmerized about what we have talked so far. It was very full. It was very informative and enlightening about many topics that I need a lot of time to process. Actually, just to reevaluate the way I approach this mentality when it comes to the music industry. So I also would love to thank you very much, Snezhina, for giving your input on many topics that we are facing every day as artists, as musicians, as content creators, even not only let's say being artists on music, but uh, creating content in general. So thank you so very much for informing our listeners and us, me and Alex, at the same time. And hopefully, in the future, once again, we would love to have you here or have any other organization between us on any other platform.
Yes,
It,
I would
it's
love
it's
to
great
meet
to
you in
be.
real life, guys. It would be so awesome.
Once
Precisely.
this whole, and I'm gonna timestamp this whole episode now, because once this Corona shit is over for good, we're definitely gonna organize something. Who knows? Maybe we'll have an episode 2 in real life this time, because I actually miss people.
Same here.
So yeah. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching. This has been a really cool episode, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.
See you guys. Take care.
Bye.